That was the most expensive drink your company has ever served. Marcus Reed said it so quietly that the music at the Sterling Room seemed to bend around his voice. A moment earlier, the bar had been alive with Thursday night money, low jazz, crystal glasses, soft laughter, tailored suits, diamond studs catching amber light from the ceiling fixtures. Then Claire Whitmore threw her whiskey across his white shirt, and everything changed. The liquid spread fast, dark and cold, running from his collarbone to the center of his chest in a crooked stain that looked almost black under the bar lights. Ice tapped once against the polished floor. Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else stopped mid-laugh with a glass halfway to his mouth. Marcus did not move at first. He only looked down at the ruined shirt, then at the square table beside him, the one marked reserved with a small brass sign. The same table Claire had walked toward with her chin lifted, her friends behind her, her confidence wrapped around her like perfume. She was blonde, sharp-eyed, dressed in a cream blazer that looked expensive enough to pay a month's rent in some neighborhoods, and she wore entitlement with the ease of someone who had never had to name it. "Excuse me," she said, her smile stiffening. Marcus picked up a napkin, not quickly, not angrily, just carefully, as if every movement mattered. The bartender, Ethan Brooks, froze with one hand on a towel. He had seen rude customers before. He had seen executives act like the room existed only to orbit them. But he had not seen a woman look a man up and down with that kind of practiced disgust and decide, in front of half the bar, that he did not belong. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound personal but not enough to hide the cruelty. "This table is for executives," she said, "not charity cases." A few people shifted in their seats. Nobody corrected her. Nobody said his name. Nobody asked if he was all right. Marcus felt the whiskey cooling against his skin and smelled the oak and smoke of it rising from his shirt. He noticed small things because small things kept a man steady. The tiny crack in the marble bar top, the soft buzz of the neon sign above the back shelf, the way Ethan's jaw tightened like he wanted to speak but feared the kind of customer Claire clearly was. Marcus had lived long enough to know that silence could be a choice, and sometimes the most dangerous rooms were not the ones filled with hatred, but the ones filled with people waiting to see whether hatred would cost them anything. Claire mistook his calm for embarrassment. She tilted her head, scanning his plain jacket, his simple shoes, the absence of a luxury watch on his wrist. "You people really do get bold when nobody checks you," she said. The sentence landed heavier than the drink. The music kept playing but softer now, as if even the speakers were uncomfortable. Marcus finally raised his eyes. They were not furious. That unsettled her more than anger would have. They were steady, tired, almost disappointed. "Do you treat everyone this way?" he asked. "Or only the ones you think can't hurt you?" Claire laughed once, a brittle sound. "Please, don't try to make this dramatic. You were sitting at my company's table." Behind her, two junior employees from Whitmore Biosystems exchanged nervous looks. One of them, Rachel Adams, went pale. She recognized Marcus from the confidential investor packet she had helped prepare that afternoon. Reed Horizon Capital. Managing partner. Final approval authority. The man standing in front of Claire with whiskey soaking his shirt was not a stranger trying to sneak into a VIP section. He was the investor Whitmore Biosystems had spent 6 months chasing. The one whose $100 million commitment could keep their pediatric heart scanner from dying in development. Rachel's lips parted, but fear closed them again. Claire had ended careers with less than a raised eyebrow. Marcus saw Rachel's recognition, saw the panic flicker across her face, and understood more than she wanted him to. This was not just one woman's insult. This was a culture training good people to look down, stay quiet, and let power behave badly. Ethan stepped around the bar at last and held out a clean towel. "Sir," he said softly, "I'm sorry." Marcus accepted it with a small nod. "Thank you." Claire rolled her eyes. "Don't apologize to him. Call the manager. I want him removed before my father gets here." Marcus pressed the towel once against his shirt, then set it neatly on the table. His phone rested beside the untouched glass of water he had ordered 10 minutes earlier. The screen lit up with a message from Daniel Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Biosystems. "Looking forward to finally meeting you tonight, Mr. Reed." Marcus looked at the message, then back at Claire. The room waited. The ice on the floor melted into a thin, clear ring beneath the golden light. Then Marcus spoke, calm enough for every person nearby to hear. Your father wanted me to believe Whitmore Biosystems was ready to save children's lives. You just made me wonder whether your company even knows how to respect one. Marcus Reed had learned early that the world often looked at him before it listened to him. Long before there were investor calls, hospital boardrooms, and people who suddenly remembered to say sir when they saw his signature on a contract, there had been Baltimore heat rising off cracked sidewalks and the sound of his father coming home after 10 hours under car hoods. His mother, Denise Reed, worked nights as a nurse at Mercy General, leaving before dinner and returning after sunrise with swollen feet, tired eyes, and a smile she somehow kept for him. Their house was small, 2 bedrooms and a narrow kitchen with a window that stuck in summer, but Denise made it feel warm. She taped his report cards to the refrigerator. She ironed his church shirt every Sunday. She told him that intelligence was a gift, but kindness was a responsibility. Marcus used to believe that was enough. Then, when he was 19, his mother collapsed in that same kitchen while making tea. The first clinic sent her home with pain medication and a warning to rest. The second said the machine they needed was unavailable until Monday. By Monday it was too late. The doctors used careful words, but Marcus heard the truth underneath them. A better scan sooner might have saved her life. That sentence followed him for the next 20 years. It followed him through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. Followed him through business school, where classmates talked about markets like numbers were the only things that bled. It followed him into conference rooms where he watched brilliant medical ideas die because they were not profitable fast enough for people who had never waited in an emergency room with a prayer in their throat. That was why he built Reed Horizon Capital. Not to buy yachts. Not to appear on magazine covers. Not to become the kind of man who needed everyone to know his net worth before they knew his name. He built it to fund the devices and treatments that could reach children in rural hospitals, working parents without premium insurance, elderly people who were tired of being told to wait. Whitmore Biosystems had caught his attention because their pediatric heart scanner could detect hidden defects in minutes, without surgery, without frightening children, and at a cost small clinics could actually afford. On paper, it was exactly the kind of technology Marcus believed his mother would have wanted him to protect. But paper never told the whole story. That was why he had asked to meet the Whitmore team quietly, away from stage lights and prepared speeches. He wanted to see who they were when they were not performing for money. He chose the Sterling Room because Daniel Whitmore had suggested it, a polished Manhattan bar 3 blocks from the company hotel, the kind of place where executives spoke softly and bills arrived inside leather folders. Marcus arrived early, as he always did. He wore a plain navy jacket, dark jeans, and a white shirt because he had never trusted people who needed costume jewelry for confidence. He ordered water with lemon. He checked the final investment memo once, then closed it. $100 million was not just capital. It was trust. It was permission for a company to grow. It was a statement that Reed Horizon believed their technology, their leadership, and their culture could carry the weight of saving lives. Before Claire walked in, Marcus had been leaning toward yes. The numbers were difficult but workable. The product was promising. Daniel Whitmore had sounded sincere on calls, almost desperate in the way fathers become when a family legacy starts slipping through their hands. Marcus had even imagined calling his board that night and saying, "We move forward." Then Claire arrived with her laughter, her impatience, and her eyes that measured his value in less than 3 seconds. She did not ask who he was. She did not ask why he was there. She saw a black man at a reserved table and decided the room had made a mistake. Now, with whiskey drying against his shirt and the bar watching in uneasy silence, Marcus understood that his real meeting had started before anyone introduced themselves. Claire Whitmore had never thought of herself as cruel. In her own mind, she was simply direct, selective, protective of standards, the kind of woman who believed excellence had a look, a sound, a posture, and usually a last name people recognized before the elevator doors opened. She had grown up in Greenwich, Connecticut, inside a stone house with heated floors, a tennis court, and a driveway long enough to make visitors slow down before they reached the front door. Her father, Daniel Whitmore, built Whitmore Biosystems from a 2-room lab into a medical technology company with offices in Boston, New York, and San Diego. To the public, Daniel was the visionary. To investors, he was the steady hand. To Claire, He was the man whose shadow she had spent her entire life trying to outrun while still using it as shelter. She became vice president of strategic partnerships at 34, and although her resume was polished, everyone inside the company knew her surname opened doors faster than her presentations did. Claire hated knowing that. So she sharpened herself. She corrected interns in public. She dismissed junior analysts before they finished speaking. She made assistants cry quietly in restroom stalls and later called it pressure training. She told herself the business world was not a charity, that softness got companies eaten alive, that anyone who could not handle her tone would never survive real negotiations. But beneath the clean language of ambition lived something uglier, something she never named because naming it would require shame. She trusted people who looked like the room she grew up in. She doubted people who did not. She heard authority more easily from white men in tailored suits than from anyone standing outside that picture. At the Sterling Room that night, Claire was not just drinking with colleagues. She was waiting for a rescue. Whitmore Biosystems had 6 weeks of operating runway left. Their pediatric heart scanner was brilliant but expensive to manufacture, and 2 hospital networks had delayed purchase orders. If Reed Horizon Capital walked away, layoffs would begin before Thanksgiving. Engineers would lose jobs. Clinical trials would freeze. Daniel Whitmore's legacy would become a cautionary tale whispered at conferences by people pretending they had seen the collapse coming. Claire knew all of that, but pressure did not humble her. It made her harsher. She arrived at the bar with 3 employees behind her: Rachel Adams from corporate development, Martin Blake from legal, and Olivia Grant from communications. None of them wanted to be there. They knew Claire was already irritated because the mysterious investor had refused a formal dinner and insisted on an informal meeting instead. Claire had called it disrespectful in the car. She had said real money did not hide in corners. Then she saw Marcus sitting at the reserved table, calm and alone, and every insecurity inside her found a target. He did not match the image she had created of the person who could save them. No gray hair. No European watch. No entourage. No visible hunger to impress her. Just a black man with a quiet face, a glass of water, and a plain jacket that gave her no reason to feel small unless she had already brought that fear with her. Rachel knew something was wrong before Claire spoke. She had seen Marcus's photo in the investor briefing, but in the warm dimness of the bar, under the pressure of Claire's presence, certainty came a second too late. By then, the whiskey had already stained his shirt, and the room had learned exactly who Claire became when she believed consequences were impossible. Marcus did not answer Claire with volume. He answered her with stillness, and that stillness moved through the Sterling Room more powerfully than shouting ever could. He placed the damp towel on the table, aligned its edge with the brass reserved sign, and looked past Claire toward the 3 Whitmore employees standing behind her. Rachel Adams had gone pale. Martin Blake kept his eyes fixed on the floor as if the polished wood had suddenly become fascinating. Olivia Grant held her phone against her chest, her thumb hovering over the screen but not moving. They knew. Marcus could see it in the tension around their mouths, in the way they avoided both his eyes and Claire's. They knew something had gone wrong, and still they waited for someone else to become brave first. Claire misread his silence again. "Are you finished making a scene?" she asked. "Because some of us are here for an actual business meeting." Ethan Brooks stepped forward from behind the bar, holding another towel and a glass of water. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "he was seated here before you arrived." His reservation was confirmed. Claire turned on him with a look sharp enough to make the young bartender swallow. "I did not ask for your opinion." Ethan's face flushed, but he did not step back. "No, ma'am," he said. "But you should probably hear it anyway." That was the first crack. Small, almost quiet, but real. A man in a gray suit at the next table lowered his menu. A woman near the window stopped pretending not to listen. Marcus looked at Ethan, and something like gratitude passed between them without needing words. Ethan was not powerful. He could lose his job for speaking at the wrong time to the wrong customer. But he had seen the insult, and he had decided that seeing it made him responsible for something. Claire's eyes narrowed. "Get your manager." "Already on the way," Ethan said. His voice shook only slightly. "And the security footage is saved automatically, just so everyone knows." The words settled over the room like a door closing. Claire's confidence flickered, not from regret, but from calculation. Marcus noticed that too. She was not thinking about what she had done. She was thinking about who might see it. He reached for his phone and turned it face down, not because he wanted to hide anything but because he did not need a device to prove what the room already knew. "Miss Whitmore," Marcus said, using her name for the first time. Rachel's breath caught. Claire heard it and glanced back, irritated. "What?" Marcus asked softly. "You are surprised I know your name?" Claire stiffened. "Who are you?" Before Marcus could answer, Rachel finally found her voice. "Claire," she whispered. "That is Marcus Reed." The words were not loud, but they cut through the bar with surgical precision. Martin closed his eyes. Olivia's hand dropped from her phone. Claire stared at Rachel as if the sentence had been spoken in another language. "No," she said, almost laughing. "That is not possible." Marcus picked up the untouched water glass, took a slow sip and set it back down. "Possibility is an interesting thing," he said. "Most people only believe in it when it arrives wearing the right suit." Claire looked at his jacket, then at his shirt, then at the reserved sign, then at Rachel. The pieces began arranging themselves in her mind, but pride fought every one of them. "If this is some kind of setup," she said, her voice tighter now, "it is unprofessional." Marcus nodded once, as if she had confirmed something private. "No," he said. "This was not a setup. This was an answer to a question I had not asked yet." The manager appeared near the host's stand, moving quickly but cautiously, reading the room before entering it. Marcus remained where he was, shoulders square, shirt stained, face calm. He had every reason to embarrass Claire, every right to expose her in the harshest possible way, but he chose not to perform cruelty for an audience. Instead, he looked at Rachel, Martin, and Olivia. "I came here tonight to learn whether Whitmore Biosystems could be trusted with $100 million and a mission that matters. I expected to review leadership, risk, and culture next week." He paused, and the silence tightened around every table. Apparently, culture arrived early. Claire's face changed in stages, first confusion, then recognition, then a flash of fear so quick she tried to cover it with anger. "Rachel," she said, turning slightly, "do not start whispering like you know something I do." "Not." Rachel stood with both hands clasped in front of her, the way junior employees stood when they had learned that truth could be dangerous if spoken in front of the wrong person. "I am sorry," she said, barely above a whisper. "He is the managing partner from Reed Horizon." Martin Blake cleared his throat, but no words followed. Olivia looked toward the entrance as if she wished the Manhattan sidewalk would open and let her disappear into the rain-dark street. Claire's lips parted, then closed again. For one second, Marcus thought she might apologize. Not because she understood, not yet, but because consequences had finally entered the room wearing his name. Instead, she reached for pride like a person grabbing a railing on a sinking stairway. "Well," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded thinner than before, "then maybe Mr. Reed should understand that first impressions go both ways." The manager, a careful man named Paul Emerson, had stopped beside Ethan at the end of the bar. He looked at Marcus's stained shirt, then at Claire, then at the silent Whitmore employees. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. Claire answered too quickly. "Yes. Your staff allowed a misunderstanding to become theatrical." Ethan's eyebrows lifted, but he kept quiet. Marcus did not. "There was no misunderstanding," he said. "Miss Whitmore assumed I did not belong at her table. Then she acted on that assumption." Claire's cheeks colored. "I did not know who you were." The sentence came out sharp, defensive, and worse than silence. Marcus let it sit there. The room understood it before she did. She had not denied the insult. She had only admitted that she would have behaved differently if she had known he was powerful. Ethan looked down. Rachel shut her eyes. Even Paul, trained by years of hospitality to smooth every edge, had no expression ready for that. Marcus folded his hands in front of him. "That is exactly the problem." Claire exhaled through her nose, impatient now, embarrassed enough to become reckless. "You are turning one spilled drink into a moral trial." "No," Marcus said. "You turned it into one when you decided my dignity depended on whether I could benefit you." Claire's posture tightened. She glanced around and saw people watching, not with admiration but judgment. The bar that had protected her with silence a few minutes earlier now felt full of witnesses. Her voice dropped. My father will not appreciate being embarrassed over something this small. Marcus looked at the dark stain across his shirt. Small things reveal large systems. Martin finally stepped forward. Claire, we should call Daniel. Do not tell me what to do, she snapped, then caught herself because Marcus was watching. The snap had been brief, but it exposed another layer. This was not an isolated mistake. This was how she ruled people who needed their jobs. Rachel's shoulders folded inward. Olivia's fingers trembled around her phone. Marcus saw it all the way a doctor reads a scan and finds a sickness hiding under clean skin. He had reviewed Whitmore's financial statements, manufacturing delays, regulatory path, and hospital pilot data. He had not yet reviewed the fear in its employees. Now he had. Claire stepped closer, not enough to threaten, only enough to reclaim space. Listen, she said, trying to soften her voice without softening herself. We can move past this professionally. Marcus studied her. Can we? She swallowed. Yes. I am willing to overlook your tone. A short, stunned silence followed. Ethan looked at Marcus as if he could not believe she had said it. Rachel's face fell. Marcus almost smiled, not from amusement but from sadness. There it was, the final proof. Claire did not want repair. She wanted control of the story. Outside, rain tapped gently against the front windows, blurring taxi lights into yellow streaks. Inside, the air had gone cold around the polished bar and untouched drinks. Marcus picked up his phone again. The message from Daniel Whitmore still glowed on the screen, hopeful and unaware. Marcus opened the draft email to read Horizon's investment committee. It had been prepared for approval. $100 million, conditional on final cultural and leadership review. His thumb hovered over the subject line. Claire noticed the movement, and for the first time her voice lost its edge. What are you doing? Marcus looked at her, calm and almost sorrowful. The part of the meeting your company should have prepared for. Marcus did not send the email in front of Claire. Not yet. He locked the screen, slipped the phone into his jacket pocket, and looked toward the back hallway of the Sterling room. Excuse me, he said. His voice was even, almost gentle, but no one mistook it for surrender. Paul Emerson stepped aside without a word. Ethan watched Marcus cross the room with the towel folded in one hand, the whiskey stain dark against his shirt, his steps measured against the low pulse of jazz coming from the speakers. Every eye followed him, but Marcus did not turn around. He entered the restroom, let the door close softly behind him, and for the first time that night, the silence belonged only to him. The room was bright with white tile and chrome fixtures. A row of mirrors reflected him from several angles, multiplying the stain, the tiredness in his eyes, the tension he had refused to give Claire the satisfaction of seeing. He set both hands on the cool marble sink and bowed his head. The scent of whiskey rose from his shirt, sharp and smoky, mixing with lemon soap and the faint metallic hum of the hand dryer. For a moment he was not in Manhattan. He was 19 again, standing in a hospital corridor in Baltimore at 3 a.m, hearing a doctor say the kind of sentence that changed the shape of a life. We found it too late. He remembered his mother's hand in his the night before, warm but weak, her thumb brushing his knuckles as if she were still trying to comfort him. Denise Reed had never owned anything expensive, but she carried herself like a woman no room could reduce. She had once told him while folding laundry under a buzzing kitchen light, "Son, power is not what you can destroy. Power is what you refuse to become." Back then Marcus had thought he understood. Years later, with $100 million sitting behind a locked phone and a woman outside waiting to see whether he would punish her, the words felt heavier. He turned on the faucet. Cold water rushed over his hands, clean and immediate. He dampened the towel and pressed it against the stain, knowing it would not come out, not completely. Some marks were like that. They faded only enough for people who had not been there to pretend nothing happened. He looked at himself in the mirror and let the anger pass through him without handing it the steering wheel. He had every reason to withdraw. He had every reason to call his board, cancel the deal, and let Whitmore Biosystems collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. But then he saw a different image, A child lying still while a small scanner moved across her chest. A nurse reading results before it was too late. A mother driving home with hope instead of funeral silence. That was what made the decision painful. Claire deserved consequence. The children who might need that machine did not. Marcus dried his hands slowly. His breathing steadied. Outside the restroom door, the bar remained hushed, waiting for the explosion that never came. He straightened his jacket, though the shirt beneath it was ruined. He picked up his phone and opened the email again. This time he changed the subject line. Not approved. Not rejected. Deferred pending leadership review. His thumb hovered for 1 second then stopped. He was not ready to end the story in private. He needed Daniel Whitmore to hear why. He needed Claire to understand that money could be lost in a second, but trust was lost in the small moments people thought did not matter. Marcus closed the phone and looked once more at the mirror. The man looking back at him was not untouched, but he was unbroken. When he returned to the bar, the rain against the windows had softened to a steady whisper. Claire stood near the table with her arms crossed too tightly, pretending impatience while fear worked underneath her skin. Rachel looked at Marcus with the expression of someone praying he would do what she had failed to do. Ethan stood behind the bar, towel over his shoulder, quiet and alert. Marcus stopped at the edge of the reserved table and placed his phone beside the glass of water. Then he looked at Claire, not cruelly, not triumphantly, but with the calm weight of a man who had chosen judgment over revenge. I stepped away, he said, because I wanted to make sure my decision came from principle, not anger. Marcus's words did not land like an argument. They landed like a verdict everyone had been waiting to hear. Claire stared at him from across the reserved table, her arms still crossed, though her fingers had begun to press into the sleeves of her cream blazer. Principle, she repeated, trying to sound amused, but the word broke slightly in her mouth. Marcus looked at Rachel, then Martin, then Olivia. I need a clear answer from someone at Whitmore Biosystems, he said. Is this how your leadership handles people it believes have no power? No one moved. The question hung over the table, heavy as wet wool. Martin adjusted his glasses. Olivia lowered her gaze. Rachel swallowed hard, and this time she did not look away. Not everyone, she said softly. Claire turned toward her. Rachel. The warning in her voice was quiet, but the room heard it. Rachel's shoulders tightened, yet something inside her had already crossed a line and could not return. It is not everyone, Rachel said a little louder. But people are afraid to speak up when it happens. Claire's face went still. Marcus did not smile. He did not celebrate Rachel's courage. He simply let the truth have space. Ethan stood motionless behind the bar, one hand resting on the polished wood, watching the kind of moment that rarely happened in expensive rooms. Someone low enough in the hierarchy choosing honesty over safety. Then Marcus's phone began to vibrate on the table. The screen lit up with Daniel Whitmore's name. Claire saw it and went pale before Marcus even touched it. Marcus answered and placed the call on speaker without raising his voice. Mr. Whitmore. Daniel's voice came through warm at first, hurried but hopeful. Marcus, I am 5 minutes out. Traffic on Park Avenue is a nightmare. But I am looking forward to finally shaking your hand. Claire should already be there with the team. Marcus looked at Claire. She is. A pause followed, short but sharp. Daniel heard something in the silence that changed his tone. Is everything all right? Marcus took a slow breath. Around him the bar seemed to shrink. The jazz faded under the soft hiss of rain against the windows. No, Marcus said. It is not. Claire stepped forward quickly. Dad, there was a misunderstanding. Marcus raised one hand, not harshly, just enough to stop the interruption. Your daughter saw me at the table you reserved for our meeting. She assumed I did not belong. She threw her drink on me, insulted me publicly, and then explained that she would have behaved differently if she had known who I was. The speaker went silent. Not static. Not confusion. Silence. The kind that meant a person on the other end was rebuilding the entire night in his mind and not liking what he saw. Claire's lips parted. That is not fair. Rachel whispered. Claire, it is true. Daniel finally spoke and the warmth was gone. Claire, tell me that did not happen. She looked around, searching for one friendly face, but the room had run out of places for her to hide. I did not know it was him, she said. The sentence collapsed as soon as it left her. Daniel exhaled, and for the first time he sounded old. Oh my God. Marcus looked down at the phone. I came tonight prepared to approve a $100 million commitment, pending a final culture review. That review has now happened sooner than expected. Daniel's voice sharpened with panic. Marcus, please. Whatever happened, let me come in and address it directly. Do not make a final decision in the middle of a bar. Marcus's eyes stayed on Claire, but his voice remained calm. I am not making it in the middle of a bar. I am making it in the middle of evidence. He unlocked his phone, opened the email, and this time his thumb did not hover. It pressed send. A soft sound confirmed what the whole room already felt. Claire flinched as if the sound had crossed the space and touched her. Marcus set the phone down. The investment is deferred. Reed Horizon is withdrawing approval until your board completes an independent leadership and ethics review. Daniel's breath caught through the speaker. Marcus, that delay could cost us the manufacturing window. I know, Marcus said. And that is why I am disappointed. Claire stared at him, her confidence finally stripped down to fear. You cannot do this over one drink. Marcus looked at her, not with hatred, but with the unbearable calm of someone telling the truth. I did not. You did it when you showed me what your company protects when no one important is watching. Daniel said her name once, low and stunned. Claire did not answer. Outside, a taxi passed through the rain, its headlights sliding over the window and across Marcus's stained shirt. The whole bar stood in the reflection of that light, quiet enough to hear the ice finish melting on the floor. Then Marcus said the sentence Claire would remember long after the money, the title, and the applause were gone. You just cost your company $100 million. Daniel Whitmore arrived 7 minutes later with rain on his overcoat, and the expression of a man who had aged during the elevator ride. The front door opened behind him, letting in a thin gust of wet city air and the sound of tires hissing along the street outside. He stopped just inside the Sterling room, not because he did not know where to go, but because the room told him before anyone spoke. Claire stood near the reserved table, white-faced and rigid. Rachel Adams looked like she had been holding her breath for a long time. Martin Blake and Olivia Grant stood apart from Claire now, not far enough to be rude, but far enough to show a line had been drawn. Ethan Brooks remained behind the bar, quiet, watchful, the safe security footage resting somewhere invisible but undeniable. And Marcus Reed stood beneath the amber light with a ruined shirt and a calm face that made Daniel's apology feel late before it began. Daniel walked to him slowly. He did not reach out to shake his hand. Some gestures were too clean for a dirty moment. Mr. Reed, Daniel said, his voice low. I am ashamed that this happened under my company's name. Claire's eyes flicked toward him, wounded by the public distance in his words. Daniel did not look at her yet. Marcus studied him, searching for performance. He had seen powerful men apologize the way they negotiated, choosing every word to protect liability instead of truth. But Daniel's shoulders had dropped. His hair was damp at the temples. His hands were open at his sides. For once, he looked less like a chief executive officer, and more like a father who had just seen the damage privilege had done inside his own house. You should be, Marcus said. Daniel nodded. No defense came. No excuse about stress, misunderstanding, or alcohol. The absence of those excuses did more for him than a speech could have. Then Claire stepped forward. Her voice was smaller now, but still shaped by fear more than remorse. Mr. Reed, I am sorry. I should not have reacted that way. Marcus turned to her. Reacted. The single word made her blink. The room tightened again. Claire looked down at the floor, then back at the stain on his shirt. For the first time, she seemed to see it not as evidence against her, but as something she had caused. I should not have treated you that way, she said. Her throat moved as she swallowed. I assumed things about you that were wrong, and I humiliated you because I thought I could. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, as if the honesty hurt more than the scandal. Marcus let the sentence stand. He did not rescue her from it. He did not punish her with it either. An apology matters, he said, but it cannot be the price of getting your money back. Claire's face tightened, but she said nothing. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Then tell me what accountability looks like to you. Marcus looked past him toward Rachel. She straightened without realizing it. First, Marcus said, your board hires an independent firm to review leadership culture, employee retaliation, and discriminatory conduct. Not a public relations review. A real one. Employees speak without fear. Daniel nodded. Agreed. Second, Claire steps away from strategic partnerships while that review happens. Claire inhaled sharply, but Daniel answered before she could. Agreed. Marcus continued. Third, Rachel Adams joins the review committee as employee representative, with protection in writing. She spoke when it cost her something. That matters. Rachel's eyes widened. Me. Marcus nodded. Yes. Courage should not be punished quietly after the witnesses leave. Daniel looked at Rachel with an expression that carried embarrassment and gratitude together. You will have that protection by morning. The rain softened against the windows, no longer sharp, only steady. Marcus picked up his water glass but did not drink. Finally, the technology stays alive. I will not approve the original deal tonight, but I will recommend emergency bridge funding for 60 days while your board proves whether this company can change. Daniel's breath left him slowly. Relief tried to enter the room, but Marcus's next words stopped it from becoming celebration. I am not funding your reputation, he said. I am funding the children who might need that scanner. Do not confuse mercy with weakness. Claire looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her expression finally broke open beyond fear. Not forgiveness, not redemption yet. Only the first painful recognition that the man she had tried to reduce had chosen to protect people smaller than both of them. Daniel bowed his head once, not deeply but enough. Thank you, he said. Marcus slipped his phone into his pocket. Do not thank me. Become worthy of it. 3 months later, the first Whitmore pediatric heart scanner arrived in Baltimore inside a white delivery truck on a cold Monday morning, its tires crunching over a thin skin of frost in the parking lot of Mercy Community Hospital. The building was smaller than Marcus remembered, though he knew buildings did not shrink. Only grief changed the size of places. He stood near the entrance with his hands in the pockets of a dark wool coat, watching 2 technicians guide the machine through the sliding doors while nurses gathered nearby with careful excitement. No cameras had been invited. No ribbon had been stretched across the lobby. Daniel Whitmore had asked about a press statement, and Marcus had said no. Some victories were too sacred to turn into marketing. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee, disinfectant, and winter air carried in on people's coats. The same floor tiles remained, pale gray with tiny blue flecks, worn smoother near the emergency entrance. Marcus remembered sitting there at 19 with his elbows on his knees, praying in a voice too quiet for anyone but God to hear. Now he walked past that same row of chairs as the new scanner was rolled toward pediatric diagnostics, and for a moment the past and present crossed like reflections in glass. Daniel walked beside him, quieter than Marcus had ever seen him. The independent review had not been gentle. 2 executives had resigned. Claire Whitmore had stepped down from partnerships and entered a long leadership accountability program outside the company. Rachel Adams, protected by board order, now chaired the Employee Ethics Committee, and for the first time in years, people at Whitmore Biosystems had begun answering surveys without fear hidden between the lines. None of it erased what happened at the Sterling Room. It was not supposed to. Change that depended on forgetting was only decoration. Near the pediatric wing, a nurse led them to an observation window. Inside, a little girl named Amelia Porter lay calmly on an exam bed while her mother held her hand. Amelia was 8 years old with pink sneakers, a purple sweatshirt, and a stuffed rabbit tucked against her side. The scan took less than 4 minutes. No panic. No surgery. No long wait for a distant specialist. A doctor studied the screen, then turned to Amelia's mother with the careful seriousness of good news arriving just in time. They had found the defect early. It could be treated. Her mother covered her mouth with both hands and began to cry without making a sound. Marcus looked away. Not because he was embarrassed, but because some mercy was too bright to stare at directly. Daniel stood beside him, eyes wet, hands folded in front of him like a man in church. Your mother would be proud, he said softly. Marcus did not answer right away. Through the glass, Amelia smiled as the nurse handed back her stuffed rabbit. Morning light fell across the room, clean and pale, touching the scanner, the bed rail, the mother's trembling hands. Marcus placed his palm against the window, not pressing hard, just enough to feel the cool surface beneath his skin. He thought of Denise Reed, of her tired smile, of the kitchen window that stuck in summer, of the lesson she had left him before he understood its cost. Power was not what you could destroy. Power was what you refused to become. Behind him, Rachel approached quietly, carrying a folder of updated clinic partnerships. She stopped when she saw Marcus at the glass and said nothing. Daniel said nothing either. For once, everyone understood that silence could be respect instead of fear. Outside, the frost was melting from the parking lot as the sun climbed over Baltimore, turning the hospital windows gold. Marcus lowered his hand from the glass. There was no applause, no speech, no public humiliation returned to the person who had given it. Claire was not there to witness the moment, and somehow that felt right. This had never been about making her small. It had been about making the work honest enough to serve people who could not afford another delay, another excuse, another door closed by someone else's pride. Marcus buttoned his coat and walked toward the exit. As he passed the emergency waiting area, he paused beside the chair where he had once sat as a son losing his mother. A young father sat there now, holding a sleeping boy against his shoulder, worry written across his face. Marcus gave him a quiet nod. The father nodded back, not knowing who Marcus was, not knowing what had changed in the walls around him. That was fine. The best kind of justice did not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrived as a machine in a small hospital, a diagnosis made in time, a child going home, a mother breathing again. Marcus stepped outside into the cold Baltimore morning. The air stung his face, clean and sharp. Behind him, Mercy Community Hospital glowed in the early light, and for the first time in many years, the place did not feel like an ending. It felt like someone had opened a door and left it open.